Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the NGA podcast, where we talk all things gymnastics. I'm your host, Rebecca Grady, and I'm here with my incredible co-hosts,
Dr. Ian Kreider.
Mike Newdor.
All right, so parents, this episode is mostly for you. This is trying to figure out, when do we step in as parents? When do we maybe take a step back? And what should we actually be seeing in the gym? So we know that you know your kids. You can tell when something's off. Maybe it's in their body language. Maybe it's how they talk after practice or how they don't talk. Maybe it's just a gut feeling you have and you just know something might not be right. And that could be the hard part, figuring out what to do about it. Do you step in? Do you let your kids handle it? Are you overreacting? Is it really something serious? So not every situation requires a full-on intervention, but sometimes waiting too long can cause harm. And there are those tricky in-between moments where you're wondering, is this normal? Is this how they're supposed to be coaching? Am I getting too emotional as a parent? So this episode is trying to navigate all of this, but mostly those in-between moments. We're going to talk about how to support your gymnast without overstepping, when it makes sense to speak up, maybe when it makes sense to step back and just support your child's independence so they can start figuring out how to solve some of those problems that are happening in the gym. So let's start off with just what should we be seeing in the gym? I think that is a really hard thing for parents sometimes, is knowing what is normal behavior we should be seeing from a coach, especially for those parents who've never been in the gymnastics world before. So what do you guys think? What should our parents be looking for?
Good. And I guess, we can even specify a little bit more, but good behavior, right?
Yes,
Because
good behavior.
not always are normal things good, right?
Mhm.
There's definitely examples out there of like, or at least it used to be a normal thing to see in a gym. And if you see it now, you're like, ooh, man, that's not good. Let's work on that. So I think some things that I like to look at in a gym, if I know that there's, if it's a good environment for the kids, one, that the coaches are pretty level-headed. There's a difference between loud coaches and coaches who yell, right? So like I am a very loud coach and, people can hear me across the gym, but I'm not yelling negative things at the gymnasts. I'm just a loud person. And so if you hear me say, run faster, and they're all the way down there at the end of the vault runway, it's so that they can hear me. So there's a difference between making sure my gymnasts can hear me and me being loud, and a coach that yells at their athletes and gets angry at their athletes. So I want a coach that's level-headed. I want a gym that has good communication between the coaches and the gymnasts, and between the coaches and the parents. So I want a gym that has good communication along kind of all those fronts. And then from a PT standpoint, I want a gym that doesn't have half their team in braces. So
That's a good point.
If I walk into a gym and I see like half the kids are in some sort of brace, or we have a bunch of kids sitting out of practice or doing their own assignments because they're hurt, then that's going to be an issue for me. That's going to raise some red flags. Now, it could just be something weird happened and it's not a big deal. But if it's, we haven't had any accidents, we always have kids that are hurt, that's an issue.
Yeah, I think there's different ways to look at it, but I think the key is communication. I think the younger athletes sometimes don't know who to listen to in the gym. If the parents are a little bit too involved, if they sit through every practice from start to finish, sometimes the younger athletes will look over at their parents a lot for, am I doing it right? How am I doing? Rather than focusing on the coach and what the coach is saying. But the other side of that is that, I'll back up a little bit. Because our sport is so unique, it may be your first introduction as a parent to the sport of gymnastics. So you don't know a lot about it, but you do know your child and what they're thinking and what they're, what's kind of going through their head. There may be a situation where, you as a parent were a gymnast yourself, and so you do have some background in the sport. But letting the coach be the primary person that educates the student is really important. Your position should be more of one of cheerleading, if you will, talking to the child and being positive with them and letting them know that, they're doing a good job. Unless you as a parent see that they're more for boys or messing around, not doing what they're supposed to be doing, those type of things. Then as a parent, that's a behavior issue where you can talk and work with your child. But in a situation where you as a parent maybe see something in the gym that, the child is repeating the same bad habit over and over and over again. And you don't see the coach or hear the coach making the correction. They're telling them what's wrong, but not backing up and doing basics and things that they should be doing. That's where the communication factor comes in, where you can, talk with the coach and saying, little Susie or Johnny's really having trouble with this flyaway. I want them to lay it out and they keep tucking it or piking it or whatever they're doing that you don't want them to do, but you're not communicating with the parent, and the child is frustrated. So he's talking to the parent. So the parent knows the child is frustrated, but the coach really doesn't. And so that communication is really important. So you as a parent, that's a good time to step in and just set up, a quick meeting with the coach about how your child is feeling. And that will help the coach to be able to coach them better. Because sometimes if the coach will kind of turn that switch off a little bit where they're working with the athlete and the athlete continues to make the same mistake over and over again, and they think, oh, the child is just not listening. And then they stop working with the child. And that's a huge mistake. And so you as a parent can visually see that too. That's another reason to set up and communicate with the coach if you see some of those things happening. But overall, those things are going to happen from time to time. And with the younger athlete, it is a difficult thing because they listen to you as a parent and they have to learn to listen to their coach as a coach, being knowledgeable in the sport. So they have to balance both things. And sometimes they don't know which way to look, if you will. So
Yeah, I tell you what, it's been so my son does karate, and it's really like when I go and watch him, I've been a coach for quite a while now. And so I know how to coach things, even though I'm not by any means some sort of karate expert. I still know, like when the teacher says, all right, pull your knee in before you strike, or, whatever it is, I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah, I pick up that technique really quick and I could coach that back to him. And so it's been really hard for me sitting and watching to not go, hey, or even just things like, hey, pay attention. It's like, no, I need to let the coach make that correction and to stop him from always looking over at me for some sort of correction. Right. And man, it's so hard. I finally kind of have understood what parents go through. Because whether I actually know what I think I know or not, I could be completely wrong on what I think I know. But I can see it from the parent's perspective where you're just like, he said, point your toes. So why aren't you pointing your toes? And I need to tell him to point his toes because he'll listen to me. And so it's one of those things where, man, it is tough. It's tough to be only the behavior coach and not the technique coach when I see him doing stuff. So that's tough for me. I don't know if that's where other parents are coming from necessarily, but I could definitely see where they're coming from now.
Oh my gosh, that is. Because my oldest did gymnastics, started when we were in Florida, and it was just, the little tiny tot one. And I was watching that too, and it is so hard to say that stuff. I always wait to the end. I'm like, hey, so remember we have to listen to our coach and like
Right.
explain those things and reinforce that stuff. But
Yeah.
the only real reason that it was easy for me to do it is because I had one of those parents sitting next to me that was constantly coaching their child and overstepping, and the child couldn't even hear the coach and wouldn't even look at the coach. She just kept looking at her daddy the whole time. And I
Right.
was just like, oh,
All right.
that
Don't be
was,
that person.
yeah, I was like, do not do that. Come on, Becca, reel it in.
Yep.
We're not doing that.
It is tough though. It is tough not to be that person, at least for me, because I have been coaching for so long and I feel like I'm decent at it. So it's tough not to be that person.
yeah, you as a parent, you want to help. You see your child out there struggling and you want to help. And so, but sometimes in doing so, you overstep really what's being helpful for the child. If you can get through that stage, as the child grows older and more mature and they start to listen to a coach, some of those issues and things will go away, but you really have to get through that, and you as a parent have to hold back sometimes on something you might want to say or do. So as the child grows older, especially when they turn 16 and they start driving themselves to the gym and you're no longer at the gym as a parent, so all you hear is the stories that they come home with. And so those stories are your connection or your communication with the coach of how they're feeling. And as Ian had said, I think before, if you start to hear those things from your child, that something's just not right, or they're unhappy for some reason, that's the time as a parent to start that communication and find, hey, my daughter's coming home, from gym, and these are the things she's telling me. Is there something that we can do at home to help, with the situation? Those type of things are important. The other one is if the parent isn't, it's a working parent, they can't be at the gym all the time, and they pick their child up, and that ride home, they're hearing about what happened at gym. And it's okay to hear what happened at gym. I think that's really important. If the child isn't talking about what's happening at gym to you, that's another red flag. Something may be wrong. So you need to really communicate with your child to find out, really what's going on at the gym, if they're kind of clamming up and not talking about things. Because, if you don't know as a parent what's going on, it's hard for you to help out or communicate with the coach to make things better for that child. And that's sometimes where the burnout happens, or if they're just not happy, they, out of the blue, they just say, hey, I don't want to go to gym anymore. And you're just like, what are you talking about? You love gymnastics, why, and so that communication with your, as Ian said before, between the coach, the child, and the parent, and the other coaches in the gym is extremely important.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
something that, as a coach, I'm working on getting better at, right? Because it's so easy to try and put the communication on the child. And, it's good for kids to learn communication skills and learn some responsibility of carrying messages to their parents. And, that's certainly not a bad thing for them to learn. But I've recognized that, hey, I need to make sure that I'm doing a better job at communicating directly to the parents and not just communicate to the child about like, hey, make sure that you're, even simple things, right? Like, hey, make sure you're here 30 minutes early tomorrow for whatever we got going on, making sure that the parents know that too.
Kind of opening up the door also, myself being a club owner, I talk to all of my coaches, recreational and team, and I always say, after your class, go out into the parent waiting area, because that's a time where the parent can kind of track you down, if you will, or if they're unhappy, or if their child is unhappy, that's where the communication starts. Now, you may not have time to fix the problem in that short period of time, but at least you're aware, and you can set up a time to meet with the parent and the child to talk about whatever the issue is. Just making yourself, the coach making themselves available to the parent is extremely important.
Yeah, and I really liked doing that when I was coaching, because you can get so much insight from the parent as well. We can kind of communicate what's going on, but they can say, hey, I can tell my child is very apprehensive to come and talk to you, or I have a very shy child, or just whatever. You can learn those things about your athletes to be able to be like, oh, so I need to go and ask them if they're doing okay, or if they have any questions, because sometimes kids need to be prompted to know that they can ask questions, that they can communicate with their coach instead of just listening to them. So, I think that's great, going out into the lobby and talking to parents, because you can just learn so much all around with your athlete and how you can help them.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And you'll find stuff out like, oh, well, their uncle died this week, and that's why she's acting different this week. And they forgot to send you a text about it because they've been dealing with all the things too. But if you go out there and just be like, hey, what's going on with Susie? She's like, oh, I forgot to tell you. Or even something simple like, oh, we moved houses, and that was the house that she's lived in her entire life, and now we've moved houses, and she's got all her feelings up about it. So, there's little things.
Oh, yeah. We forget about how those things impact kids so much. They impact us, but we just have to go day to day. You see it so much more in kids. One thing that I was going to pull off of kind of what Mike was saying is that about parents going in and talking to the coaches is, before even going in and talking to the coaches, try to not make assumptions about what your kids are saying about the coach, if that makes sense. Get them to explain a little bit more, because sometimes our kids are just going to be angry with their coaches because of maybe some of the rules that are in the gym, or what they did that day. Maybe they didn't get to do series on balance beam when they really wanted to. So some of those things, your athlete is going to be frustrated. They're going to be emotional. They're going to have anxiety. All those things are very normal. So trying to get them to expand on what they're saying before we jump into fixing things. Because a lot of times when we hear our kids, we do just want to fix it. We don't want them in pain. We don't want them hurting. So we want to solve their problems. But sometimes when we do that, we don't actually get all of the story. So I'm just saying that maybe make sure that you communicate with your athlete first and see what maybe the real source of the problem was.
Yeah, maybe the coach doesn't actually like your daughter and didn't let her move up because of that. Or maybe it's because she didn't have all her skills, right? And
Yeah.
that's why she didn't get to move up to the next level. Yeah. So definitely, yeah, coming into the meeting with an open mind, I think helps a
Yeah.
lot. And just getting more clarification first before the accusation starts would be beneficial for us as coaches. That would be nice.
Yeah, because if they're coming in and they're angry, then coaches are defensive, and then that
Yeah.
just it does
Nothing. Yeah.
not allow you to go in a positive direction in solving the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. You want I mean, obviously, you want your child to be happy, in and out of the gym. But just be aware, there's always two sides to every story, and it's good to, as Ian said, come in with an open mind and listen to both sides or concerns, because ultimately you're getting together because you both want to help the child, and so keeping that in mind going into the meeting, I think, is foremost.
Yeah. And if it's appropriate, have the kid in the meeting as well. Right.
Yes.
So, especially with my older athletes, I usually want them in the meeting as well because, it's their gymnastics and we want to make sure that they're included in the talk so that they, one, can understand more clearly what's going on, and two, they can have their input into the conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's almost a must, regardless of the age of the child, to involve them in that communication so that they know their coach is human and they can actually talk to their coach
Mm.
as they do their parents.
Yes. And one thing that I always encourage to before the meeting thing, because I have a lot of kids who will tell me, like, oh, I just don't think my coach likes me. They just don't want to help me. They're not seeing that I need corrections. They're not paying attention to me. And one of the first things I'll ask them is, well, do you go and ask your coach for help? Do you ask them to
Right.
watch you? And a lot of them don't. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, no. I mean, just aren't they supposed to just look at me? And I was like, I mean, there's so many of you. So it might be a good idea first to go up to your coach and say, hey, can you watch me do this skill? Or just this basic communication stuff, because a lot of times they'll form these things in their mind that's really not happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The quiet kids, a lot of times, unless they're just crazy hard workers, the quiet kids often get overlooked because, they're taking a normal amount of turns, but there's three other crazy kids in that group that are going, hey, Coach Ian, watch this. Hey, Coach Ian, watch
Mm-hmm.
this. Hey, Coach Ian, watch this. Right. And I'm like, hang on, let me watch this bar for just a little bit. And then there's always the funny exact opposite one where, I'll just happen to turn around and look at somebody about to take a turn and like, oh, you're going to watch this one? I was like, well, I kind of get paid to watch, so you should probably go ahead and go.
That's funny. The parent situation, like what's a healthy amount of time as a parent to be in the gym? And
Oh, yeah,
and
that's a good.
Yeah, that's a good.
if you're in the gym start to finish every practice of your child, that's too much. The opposite happens, like I said, as the child gets older, you don't think you need to be around as much, and then you stop showing up at all, and that's not good either, because they want you to be part of their gymnastics, career, if you will. They want to see that you care about what they're doing in gymnastics. So you can't not come at all. But what is that percentage and that balance? I would say that it's a little higher when the kids are younger, and as they progress up, you can you want to back off of that, but you don't want to be there the whole practice, even when they're younger. You want to be there from time to time to watch them. Say if they're there 3 days, 3 days a week, maybe 1 or 2 days you come to watch them. And as they grow older, if they're training 5 days a week, maybe there again, you come 1 day a week to watch them, because they want to feel that you care about their gymnastics. But at the same time, you don't want to be there every second of every day, because that's not beneficial to the child either. But from what we talked about before, where they need to keep their focus on their coach and their gymnastics and not their focus on you. So there has to be a balance there. And I've never really thought about what's the percentage based on age, but maybe we can
Right.
work on something like that. It might be
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah.
I mean, we need to, because when you're saying that, I'm like, I am that parent because of my job and my history in crisis and trauma. I am a very involved parent, especially because my kids are little, and I just want to make sure that they're safe and that they're thriving. I don't engage in the practice, but I am also one of those parents who watches. So there's like a certain way, for me, at least, how I do it. I don't know how other people, I'd love to hear how other people do it, but I pay attention to how the coaches interact with all the athletes that are there. I pay attention to how they interact with the other coaches
Trying
and
to
things
say
like that.
you overanalyze everything. Is that what you're saying?
A little bit, yeah. So like I just like to watch the engagement and how it kind of progresses over time. And then it's like I kind of build trust, even though I don't, and I talk to them too because I want to get to know them. But I build trust over watching how they interact with everyone on the floor.
Yeah.
So then I take a step back and I'm like, okay, so then I will drop them off, but I won't stay the whole first part of the practice. I'll show up at the end and watch some of it. So if you are one of those parents like me, it's good to figure out exactly how you want to do this and then slowly take yourself off as your kids start to get older. And I don't know that exact formula either. So we do need to figure this out. If someone has one,
Right.
please share it with us because sadly I am one of those people
Yeah.
and I'm working on it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. So I see the same thing happen with the older gymnasts, right? Their parent will come and watch and they're like, what? Why is dad here? What? Is everything okay? Because he hasn't
Yeah.
been there in like 6 months.
So
And
maybe
just
someone
to-
died or something.
or that, or, they think like, oh, did the coach say something to my dad to make him
yeah.
come? Or, something along those lines, right? So I think be there with enough regularity to where it doesn't freak out your gymnast when you're there. That would be nice. Because then what happens when they go to the meet is you go, oh man, well, my mom and dad are both here today. So I've got to really do good at the meet. And now all of a sudden for 6 months preseason, they've been focused on themselves and how they're doing at gymnastics. And now all of a sudden, mom and dad are at the meet and they're focused on the people watching and I have to do good for them. You're like, what? What do you mean? You just put in all this hard work. Do good for you. You just focus on what you've been doing and everything's going to be just fine. So, yeah, make sure you're there often enough to where your kid doesn't freak out when you actually do come to the gym. I think that's a good base amount of time to be there. It's also good to, be there enough to learn a little bit about the sport. I don't expect my parents to know everything by any means. I don't even care if they know all the names of the skill. I did gymnastics for 16 years and my dad barely knew what a giant was. And so you don't have to learn all the names of the skills, but be there enough to learn a little bit about the sport and hey, there are 4 events in women's gymnastics and there's 6 events in men's gymnastics and this is what they are and, learn a little bit about it just like you would any other sport. So that way you can have, higher level conversations with your athlete other than, because if your gymnast knows that you don't know anything about the sports and you say, hey, well, how was practice tonight? And they say, good or fine or whatever that generic answer is. Some of that may be that, they're just a angsty teenager that doesn't want to talk to their parents. But some of that also could just be like, well, I'm going to have to sit here and explain to you every little thing about the sport for you to understand how tonight went anyway, because you don't know anything about it. So I don't know, something to think about.
And they might think it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I see with parents sometimes is they're in the gym, but their mind is not in the gyms.
Yes. I was going to say that too. Yeah.
Yeah. They'll sit down with their laptop and they'll be working the whole practice and never look up to see what their child is even doing. And so that shows the child that mom and dad, they're not interested in me. They're more interested in what's on their screen than what I'm doing. And so you have to watch that balance also.
Yeah, it was cool. So last year we had a gymnast that her dad was an NFL coach, not like head coach, but one of the coaches for NFL. So, but he had a 1-year contract with a team that was way far away. So it wasn't with the Titans, right? But he had one with the Titans before, then got another contract somewhere else. But it was just a year. So they weren't going to move just for that 1 year. They were going to figure out where he kind of settled after that. So they stayed here while he was working up there. But every time he was in town, he showed up. And the cool thing is when he showed up, right, and you could hear him cheering from across the room. Obviously, NFL guy, he's going to be really tall, really big, probably pretty loud as a coach anyway, right? And so if she did something cool, you could hear him cheering, and that was always fun. And she would she was a teenager, right? So she'd have that, or preteen, I think. And so she'd have that kind of preteen, I'm really happy dad is here, but I'm a little bit embarrassed that I can hear him cheering. It's
Stop being so loud, dad.
Yeah, that perfect amount of embarrassment and oh, I'm so happy he's here, And so you'd have that, and so he was actually paying attention, which was nice, right? He didn't come and he wasn't on his phone the whole time because I'm sure he had other things he could be doing. There was plenty of things, I'm sure, that were on his plate that he could have spent 3 hours doing. But instead, he chose to be there. He chose to actually watch, and he was cheering for his daughter, which is awesome. And then, it was funny too, because he doesn't get to see her gymnastics very often, he would record it a lot. And so she'd be like, oh, Dad's recording my turn again,
But inside, she's really happy about
Yeah,
it.
she's really happy, and she's like, oh, this, Dad's cool, right? So, it's cool. Be involved enough that your kids know that you care. And that's a really good place to be.
Yeah, I agree. What about, let's kind of shift a little bit to when there are problems in the gym, but let's say they're not huge problems, like kind of like the example I gave about the communication issue where we have those shy gymnasts, and as a parent trying to encourage them to open up a little bit more, get to know their coach more, go ask them questions. What are some things that you guys see that are maybe these small problems that our gymnasts can maybe work through on their own? And as parents, we want to try to encourage them to do that instead of just taking over.
Yeah, Mike, you got something right off the bat? I've probably got some things, but let me think about it. Yeah, that's a good one.
I tend to block Rebecca out, so I really don't know what her question was.
Oh my gosh, please say that you do that. That's hilarious.
Oh my goodness. No, yeah, so times where the kid should solve the problem instead of the parent stepping in.
Yeah,
is what
just
you're
like
getting at, right?
anything.
Yeah.
Yes, something that happens in the gym where there could be, whether it's conflict between other athletes and them, conflict between a coach and them, or just miscommunication, that sometimes parents jump in and take over, but we should be encouraging them for like growth and development as just a person.
Yeah, I would definitely say the example that you said earlier about like, hey, does your coach even know that you're taking turns? If you don't think you're getting corrections, when was the last time you asked for a correction? If you go home, or if your gymnast comes home and they say, well, I just, coaching just doesn't pay attention to me. A good follow-up to that would be, when was the last time you asked him to watch? And because you said, there's some times in groups where I have like 16 to 20 kids in a group. That doesn't happen very often, but occasionally that happens. And if I've got that many kids, unless you say something, I will not watch, right? Now, when I've got a smaller group, when I have my normal like 10-person group, yeah, then there's definitely times where coaches should be good at like head on a swivel. I spot something and then I turn and I look and see what other gymnasts are doing, right? And ideally, they're all out in front of me. That's kind of our policy at the gym, is when you can, the spotting drill that you have should be facing everything else. So that way you can spot and just immediately be watching other things. Sometimes that doesn't happen depending on which way the gymnast is turning or which way I have a dominant side that I spot on. And so sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work, and it's all good. But we just want to make sure that our gymnasts are communicating enough to be seen. And if they say they're not getting corrections, at least that first question of, did you ask them to watch you? And if they say no, you're like, okay, cool. Go try that. Before I set up a meeting and ask this coach and accuse them of never paying attention to my daughter, let's make sure we're at least communicating enough that the coach can watch, right? Because there's certainly been times where I kind of, in retrospect, I go, man, I don't think I saw that gymnast take a turn today. Is it because, one, they just had a bad day and they just didn't take any turns? Certainly, that happens where they just take a couple of turns and they're distracted by something else, or they don't feel good, or whatever it is. And they just don't take a lot of turns that day. And so that's why I missed it. Or was I just so wrapped up in this new drill that I was spotting that I had to be so incredibly focused on that I missed a bunch of other turns. So make sure that they're asking. That would be a great example of, hey, I don't need to step in here. I need to make sure my gymnast speaks up for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's good, Ian. And also, whatever the skill is, if they're struggling with the skill, to understand that the parent really can't help them with that situation, and they have to take it on themselves to talk to the coach and say, "Hey, I'm trying to do what you're asking me to do. Is there something else I can try?" The athlete is just as stressed out about it as the coach is. The coach thinks the gymnast is just not listening, where the gymnast is listening but not able to make the corrections, and so that communication, I think, is important. That's one that, as a parent, if your child comes to you with those type of things, you have to push it on the child a little bit more and say, hey, you need to ask the coach. Let the coach know how you're feeling, that you're struggling with the skill, and maybe he or she can give you some better tips. But because I, as a parent, I really can't help you with that. That's something you have to talk to the coach about.
Yeah, and if you don't know how to make the correction, encourage them to ask how to make the correction, because a lot of times they're like, my coach keeps giving me the same correction and I can't make it. but do you know how to make that correction? And
Right.
that's something big to explore. And if you don't, ask your coach, because I'm sure they can give you some tips on actually how to break it down and see how to make that correction.
Yeah, like recently I heard a story about, this was pre-team, I think, or like level 3, something like that, like really low level kid, and the coach was just yelling at him. I didn't witness it. This is a story I heard. Right, the coach was just yelling at him like, get hollow, right, get in a hollow body. And one of the other coaches walked up, the owner actually walked up like, hey, do you know what a hollow body is? The kid's like, nope. And so in that case, if you don't understand a correction, make sure that you ask for some clarification. And I make sure, just because I've seen it so many times now, I make sure even with my older athletes, I'll say something. I'm like, oh, was that confusing? Hey, did you understand what I said? And they'll be like, no. Okay, cool. Let's break that down a little bit more. And I try and make things really simple. That's like my whole mission in life, is make things simple. Even then, there's some times where I'll say something to a gymnast, they're like, I don't understand what you mean at all. Like, okay, cool. Let's break that down. Yeah, make sure you're communicating with me if you don't understand it.
And if you're a coach and you're saying that correction a million times over, maybe take a step back and be like, ooh, they may not know exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
And they might be one of those shy gymnasts. So you as a coach, reach out and try to help them with that. Okay,
you
so
might
let's
just be speaking little gymnastics and they don't know what you mean.
Hey, Rebecca, just one more thing. I know you're trying to wrap up. For the parent to understand that each child is an individual, and just because other children in the group are getting the skills faster, if they're learning faster than your child is, sometimes, that happens. And sometimes it's just the stage of development that your child is compared to the other children. And so my point is, don't compare your child to the other children in the class. Be focused on, never tell your child, well, Susie has the skill, why don't you have the skill?
Yes.
Type of a thing. Not to compare to other athletes, but just say, hey, I saw you're making improvement. I know you don't have the skill yet, but you're making improvement. Keep working on it. Those type of things. But that comparison can really be detrimental to the child's development. So I just wanted to, as a parent, throw that in there, because that's something that I hear quite a bit.
Yeah, I actually hear that quite a bit too. So I'm glad that you threw that in there. Were you going to say something, Ian?
Well, yeah, perspective, right? There are college level athletes or college level gymnasts out there that never won a meet, and that's okay, right? There can only be one person that wins at every meet. And so your kid may not be that person, and that's okay. But if they're doing well, especially for them, right? If they're progressing, if they're getting better and they're making corrections and they're along some sort of curve, then we're doing really good. Right? It's the comparison game that ruins a lot of gymnasts, and saying, well, I'm never going to get there. It's almost like a growth curve. We go to the pediatrician every year with our kids and we go, all right, are they growing like they're supposed to? Are they progressing like they're supposed to? And there's a worry when they drop off of their growth curve. But as long as they're progressing along their growth curve, just literally as they're growing,
their
right?
own,
Yeah, their own growth curve, then it's good. They don't have to be in the 99th percentile of height in order to be successful or deemed a normal kid. In fact, that would not be normal. That'd be an abnormal kid. But as long as they're growing, especially in the gymnastics world, you'll hear plenty of times of, oh yeah, well, they're at like 2% of their the second percentile in height, but they're still on their curve, so they're doing fine as far as growth. We don't have to intervene. Same thing in gymnastics. As long as they are progressing and as long as they're getting better, and hey, if they like the sport, then everything is okay, and we don't have to be too worried about it.
Okay, so let's do one quick tip, since we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes. We didn't talk about some of those serious things that can happen in gyms, whether that's coaches actually comparing their gymnasts or belittling them or not giving them corrections. They're just being mean. So that is a time for sure when parents, if your athlete's coming home and telling you those things or you observe that, those are times when you do need to go talk to the coach. Yes. And even in those situations, my first thing that I'll say is, even in those situations, still go into that parent meeting with, I know I say this a lot, but with curiosity instead of anger and judgment, because even if your coach is doing that stuff, sometimes they're not aware of it. Maybe they don't have really good self-awareness. Maybe they have a lot of stuff going on outside the gym that's impacting how they're coaching in the gym. We could bring that awareness to them. So if we come in there defensive, there's less likely that we're going to have a solution found out, and it's going to be more confrontational. So that is my one thing when it comes to stuff like that. What about you guys?
Yeah. From the PT side of things, if one big injury happens, it's not always concerning, right? Accidents happen. Everyone has different genetics. Everybody has different skeletons. Everybody, all that, right? So, for instance, lower back injuries. You hear of someone with a fracture in their lower back, and you see one person in a gym, you go, yeah, something happened. Something weird happened, probably. You see 3 or 5 gymnasts with a lower back stress fracture, and now you go, oh, man, something is wrong, right? There's an actual problem in the gym. There's a problem with their conditioning, or there's a problem with their programming. The coach isn't paying attention, something like that. So if you start to see some patterns as far as physical ailments, that's an issue, right? If everyone has a sprained ankle, something is going on. If you've had 5 instances of elbow OCD, there's a problem going on. So we've got to figure out some patterns maybe. But outside of that, sometimes, one time I was going to mention of definitely schedule a meeting and talk to the coach. If you feel like there's some bullying on the team, not necessarily from the coach, but from other athletes, it's really hard for me to hear what the athletes are saying all, 70 feet down a vault runway when they've got like 5 people all gathered back there. Now, if they're all gathered around the chalk bowl saying something, I might hear them when they're behind me. But there's a lot of times where gymnasts can be bullied and the coach has no idea. And they think that the group is fantastic and everybody's, all chummy and everything's amazing, but there might be but they're really missing it because of that. So if you feel like there's bullying on the team, then, talk to the coach immediately, because there's some times where, that's happened on my teams. And I'm just like, man, I had no clue at all. Right. Everything seemed to be going well. So thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. And I'll address that with the girls. So there's that. But yeah, if there's any sort of physical, emotional, mental abuse going on, yes, set up a meeting with the coach, talk to them. Sometimes that it's bad enough to where that meeting is just, hey, I'm letting you know we're no longer at this gym anymore.
Yes.
Right. And I've had a couple of patients before where they've told me what's going on at the gym, and then I go, you can't go back to that gym, right? You're out right now for like 6 weeks or whatever for this injury. During this 6 weeks, I need you to talk to some other gyms and find a better place to go. And coaches in that realm of things, it's getting few and further between, which is wonderful. It used to be a lot more frequent. It's not happening as much anymore. But coaches who do that have control over you and have control over your gymnasts because you don't know any better. A lot of times those gymnasts have grown up through that program and they don't know how bad it is because they've never had another program to compare it against. A lot of coaches like that don't let their kids go to camps or other things where they experience what like really actually good positive coaching is. And so make sure that if that's the case, if you think it's something weird is going on, have a conversation with somebody. Have a conversation from another mom from another gym. Hey, this is what our coaches do. Is that a normal thing, right? Because you may not know that that's not normal. Because like the last one that I had, I explained, like, hey, this is what I do at my gym. And they're like, that's not even close to what we do at our gym. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, Ian, I think you hit on a lot of really good points. I'll keep my really short because it's an easy one to detect. If you see tears, if you see crying in the gym, if you see crying on the way home when you're taking your child home from the gym, anytime you see tears, it's probably time to set up a meeting with the coach. There's something that your child is so unhappy about, or you may see other kids in the group in tears for one reason or another. And it can be a number of those things that Ian touched on. It can be the coach is being too rough on the kids, that there's bullying going on. It can be a number of those things. So you really don't know what it is. But if you see tears as a parent, it's time to really dig deeper and talk to the child, and then set up that meeting with the coach and let them know what's going on.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and one thing we talked about right before we started taping was that if you are in a bad gym and it's the only gym there, and one of the threats the coach gives you is if you don't like it, you can leave, the best thing to do is to leave. And I understand that your gymnast loves gymnastics, but also we need your gymnast to be in a healthy environment. And if it's not a good environment, if it's breaking them down, like Mike said, and you've tried to have meetings and nothing's going in the positive direction, then sometimes it's best to drive a distance if you want to go to a different gym or try a different sport. And I know that's not what we really want to be hearing, but it's something to remember that this is about your child as a human being. And sports are supposed to be something that helps you become a stronger, more resilient adult and teach you a lot of those life skills. And in a gym like that, they are not learning those things. They're not building confidence and self-esteem.
No, they're going to end up being a broken adult, not a healthy,
Yes.
amazing adult.
Exactly. All right. So I think that's a wrap on this
End
one.
on that positive note.
Yeah, that positive note. If you guys have any questions, parents, please reach out. We would love to just address any of these specific questions that you have. And to all the parents who are listening, you are doing the best that you can. We know that you love your athletes, your children, and you're trying to protect them and allow them to chase their dreams at the same time. And that can be very difficult to do and find a balance. You're not going to get it perfect all the time. But if you need help, ask questions, communicate with your coaches, communicate with your athletes, and that's some of the best things that we can do to figure out exactly what's going on in the gym. So thank you for listening today. And if you liked this episode, subscribe, review, share it with anyone that would benefit from this conversation. And until next time, stay happy, healthy, and high performing.